For more on this, I do want to bring in Madeline Somerville, who is a political analyst and attorney. And Madeline, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Of course, Stephanie, I'm always happy to be here.
So Texas Governor Greg Abbott says that he is going to try and start the process of removing Democratic lawmakers if they don't return to the Capitol by 3 p.m. this afternoon. As we take a look at the law where it stands right now, can Governor Abbott legally compel Democratic lawmakers to return to the Capitol?
He can't, but he can enforce those consequences that he's threatening. So he's saying, right, that he's going to remove folks from their seats. He can do that. And then they would either have to have a special election to fill those seats back, or he would appoint someone to take their place, and then we'd have to wait until 2026 when those first elections would happen. So he can't get them to come back. He can't, send somebody with handcuffs to bring them back, but he can punish them for this behavior.
Yeah, and he was talking about it in terms of he feels like these Democratic lawmakers have abandoned their seat and the people that they represent. When we took a look at that, how does one define abandoning a seat?
That's a really good question. I think in this case, what he's really referring to is you're walking out, because that's a term that people use in the legislature when they don't vote on something, walking out. You're walking out on your people. The problem is when you're in the minority, you already know who's going to win and who isn't. So what they're saying is essentially our votes aren't going to make a difference. The only way we can make a difference is by not being there, because you can't vote on it if you don't have that quorum of 50 or so out of the 100 people. I'm not sure what the difference in the numbers is in Georgia versus in Texas, but that is a possibility that he could try to punish them in this way.
And you were mentioning that he can't compel them to return, but he can dole out the punishments. How long does that process take? What does that process look like? Because this really isn't a common occurrence.
No, not at all. So it would work like this. Basically, he can remove them from their seats as the governor. Then I actually just went over this with my friend who specializes in this, because this is a crazy potential, but it's possible, right? Then he would appoint people to take their place. And those people do not have to be on one side or the other. He can pick whoever he wants to go sit in that seat for a temporary amount of time. Then the lower officials within that district would probably force a special election so that the people could vote as soon as possible, but it's going to take at least a couple of months to put that together. And if they don't, they're going to have to wait until 2026 when normally that person's seat would be up.
Which is very interesting. And of course, there are ramifications as we look ahead to, to the midterm elections and such. As we take a look at this, it's a little bit unprecedented that people are just walking out, refusing to return. And then the governor saying, you know what, if you don't come back, I'm going to start the process of removing you, and then putting people in place that can actually get my agenda done. As we take a look at this, and there continues to be fallout, right? You're sharing the legal perspective. As we take a look at it from the political perspective, now we're hearing from Democratic governors who say the gloves are off. We too are going to, do something similar. I have to imagine it almost sounds like it's going to be potentially chaotic.
This is really fascinating, and I think it is a direct response to folks in the Democratic Party, just voters, who are saying, why aren't you doing anything? Do something. This is something, right? And doing something sometimes looks chaotic and is unprecedented. But I think that on both sides, and that's one of the reasons why President Trump got elected, people just want something to happen. They want somebody to take some action. And so I think that actually Democratic voters are going to respond really well to this, even if it is chaotic, because it's a reasonable response in order to prevent something from happening that they think is going to make things worse in their state.
So, the Democratic lawmakers taking a stand, but is it just that? Because eventually I imagine they're going to have to come back. They have full-time jobs. They have families in the state of Texas. And there is the issue of redistricting. There is a vote on, redistricting the congressional map. Is this more of a political stand, even if they cannot stop the map from being redrawn?
Yeah, and I think that that's the exact issue, is that they can't stop it unless they're not there. So Governor Abbott has the right to, at any time, conduct redistricting. In fact, they did it in Georgia in 2023 when I was in the legislature as a speechwriter. And so technically, right, the way that it's supposed to be done is after the census takes place every 10 years, then they engage in redistricting. Actually, John Adams said that redistricting is supposed to be like a miniature version of the demographics of the country as a whole. So it's supposed to, the map is supposed to look like the people look like, the state looks like, so that you don't dilute anyone's voting power by splitting their community in half. Because different demographics tend to vote along the same party lines. So it is a political tool always when it's being used outside of that 10 years where you're going to change naturally, right? Like you're supposed to. And so there has to be a political response to this because he can do this. He's allowed to do this. So this is really the only thing that they can do in order to try to stop it.
It's going to be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. And then you have, states like New York, and we're going to be hearing from New York Governor Kathy Hochul in just a little bit. You hear from her. You also hear from California Governor Gavin Newsom saying, you know what, we too are going to be doing this. If you want to use this tool for politics, we're going to use it to our advantage at the same. And you were talking about typically this happens after the census. So it just makes sense in terms of population and movement. Now it seems like it can just happen at any time. Taking a look at this from the legal standpoint and the political standpoint, do you feel like there is going to be a larger conversation when it comes to delineating when you can and cannot redistrict maps, or do you think that this is going to continue to be along these lines?
So I think there will be a larger conversation, but I think it's going to focus on the Voting Rights Act. So the way that this gets challenged, the way that a map gets challenged, you used to have to submit all maps to the DOJ, and the DOJ would approve it based upon a certain formula that was about demographics, but that formula was outdated, and they got rid of it like 20 or 30 years ago. So you don't have to submit it to anybody, right? It stands until it's challenged. And usually the ones who challenge it are specific minority rights groups. There have been like Latino groups or Black voters groups who will bring a challenge on behalf of one voter, and then they'll join as a class on behalf of the class. And so what I think is going to happen here, because President Trump has said that he wants to challenge the Voting Rights Act, and in fact has diverted resources from and deprioritized making sure that the Voting Rights Act is being adhered to, which again says that you can't dilute the voting power of any one minority, and instead focus on voter fraud, right? That's been deprioritized. To me, what I think is going to happen, just looking at it strategically, is that they're going to bring up a case based on the Voting Rights Act, because if they're going to split up Texas to get those 5 seats, that's going to be what the challenge is. It's that and equal protection. And then my guess is they're going to try to dilute the power of the Voting Rights Act itself, because I think that they're going after specifically a lot of that legislation that took place in 1965.
So that's looking very far ahead. Governor Greg Abbott from Texas has given the Democratic lawmakers a 3 p.m. Eastern time deadline. How quickly can he remove people from their seat? Is it, snap of the fingers and they're gone, or is it a days-long, weeks-long process?
That I don't know the answer to. And I think it probably would be in the state's constitution. And actually state lawmakers, even though these rights groups can't bring a case without a voter's protection, they don't have to submit it to DOJ, the state can. You can bring these cases to state court. So I would assume that these cases would get in front of a state court like that. They would immediately start there.
I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see if anyone actually travels back before that 3 p.m. Eastern time deadline. And then you almost have this stalemate where, both sides are digging in their heels. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. As always, Madeline, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Of course. Thanks so much, Stephanie.